Hey folks, hope you're doing well out there. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing the importance of understanding maturation and personal growth as an additive process. We're going to be exploring a bit of this kind of common societal misunderstanding that's super pervasive in our culture, that to mature and to grow means somehow to destroy the younger parts of yourself or the older parts of yourself. We're going to call all of that into question, and I'm going to share my thoughts about it with you. So please join me. Alrighty, so this is a topic that I think is probably highly relevant to just about all of us, if I'm going to be honest here, that like many of the other topics I seem to find myself talking about, I've never seen discussed anywhere else before. I don't know anyone else who's talking about this. At the same time, I want to be clear here. I'm not an expert on developmental psychology or early childhood development or anything like that. I'm simply a layperson who's curious, who is exploring this as part of my own personal development, right? So I'm speaking about this in the context of my own work with myself and my context of working with clients here, okay? So I don't want to claim to be an expert, and if there is someone talking about this or this is a commonly discussed subject and I'm just not aware of it, please feel free to, send me links or comment down below and kind of send me some keywords. I would be curious, okay? But like I was saying, this is one of these things I think is highly relevant that I don't see anyone talking about. And it's something that came up with a client, and it's one of these kind of things, like a lot of the things I've learned here, that I don't necessarily think to share with you guys or kind of unpack as being relevant or important to our discussion here on the channel and the work that I do. But as it came out in the session, it was really clear that this was an important thing for this client to understand that they had never considered before, right? So essentially, the idea I want to offer you here is that we have this massive societal misunderstanding that what it means to mature, what it means to grow and develop as a human being, is some form of a destructive process whereby we are discarding, let's say, for a lack of a better term, the younger parts of ourselves, the less mature parts of ourselves, the old capacities we had, in favor of whatever new growth it means as we mature and develop forward, right? We have this very common misconception that, oh, well, there are certain behaviors and ways of thinking and ways of seeing life and ways of feeling that are appropriate for a certain age, but then when you move past that age, they no longer are appropriate or no longer a thing you should do, or et cetera, right? And we see a lot of kind of shaming, judging, kind of this kind of thing around kind of different levels or layers or stages of our, maturation and development. And while, there might be a certain element of truth to certain behaviors belonging to certain stages of development primarily, how this plays out a lot when we're looking at, let's say, healing psychologically and growth and therapeutic growth and this kind of a thing, is I will see clients who want to come in, or do come in rather, and they want to work on themselves. And the underlying kind of frame there, the underlying understanding is, okay, as I grow and as I heal this, I'm going to be discarding my current version of myself, essentially. And I think this is a massive, massive misunderstanding of the process, quite frankly, and also just doesn't track with human experience in general, right? So I want to just kind of bring this to your attention, talk about it, share about it here with you, right? So in my observation, and I think if you just stop and you look and you just think about it for a moment, I think it's pretty self-evident and obvious that, while we can think about developmental stages and kind of senses of what, it is to be mature at certain stages in your life, I could kind of see both sides of that. I think it's also concurrently true that we develop in an additive fashion, in an iterative fashion, where we are adding more on all the time. We are developing forward. And in truth, the capacities that we've had from our past are still there in us, right? So growth overall is an additive process, not a destructive or subtractive process, right? When you become an adult, you don't lose ability to access your inner child or your inner teenager. It's not your center of gravity anymore, so to speak, right? As you become an elder, you don't lose some of the thoughts or the perspectives you felt when you were 30. It's just that may not be where your center of gravity is anymore. When you're a teenager, it's not that you can't act like a 3-year-old and throw a temper tantrum, because sometimes teenagers do, right? But rather, it's just that's not where the center of gravity is for you, right? But all those earlier layers of our being are still there, right? And I think this is really important to understand, that we kind of grow more like, the rings of a tree, so to speak, than we do in some sort of like a rocket launching, where it drops the earlier pieces and it's just no longer available and no longer there. We just don't work like that as an adapting organism, right? It just doesn't make any sense, because if that were the case, we would be losing the learnings we've learned along the way, and we would kind of function only at a certain stage and not have those earlier learnings. But everything about human behavior indicates otherwise, right? Now, where this comes into play when we're talking about, therapy, healing, personal growth, personal transformation, all that, is that as you're working your edge of growth, you're going to develop new abilities and new learnings and new capacities, right? And with those new learnings, new capacities, new abilities, you may start to experience a transformation at multiple levels of your being. You might transform at an identity level, or at a behavioral level, or at an emotional level, right? Or at a relational level, or at all these levels, or at a spiritual level, right? Like, it's possible to transform and add new information at all these different layers of our being, right? And if we're involved in this process, right, especially if, let's imagine for a moment, in a younger part of ourselves, there is something there that doesn't fit our current stage of life anymore, right? So maybe I have kind of like a inner petulant, pouty, younger version of me that isn't appropriate as a 30-something, for example, right? Sure, you want to heal that, right? But I think a lot of times when we're coming to therapy or growth work, we think of it in terms of, oh, when I heal this, whatever it is, that's going to go away, right? But what if in that petulant part of myself, there's something beautiful there? What if there's something important there, right? What if there's an important piece of, say, self-esteem, or standing up for myself, or a certain sense of ability to be disagreeable, or have a bit of power, or assert myself? What if there's a part of me that needs nourishing, that's actually incredibly sweet and caring and good underneath a behavior that was learned, which is petulance in this case, right? If I think of it in terms of a destructive process where I'm just going to discard that part of myself because it's younger and no longer necessary, then I'm losing out on whatever strengths or capacities or abilities or, resources or gifts this part of me may carry, right? And the way I explain to my clients a lot is, that's a part of you. It's like, you don't want to discard a part of you. That would be like wanting to, cut off half your pinky finger because I don't need it. It's like, if you can help it, don't discard any part of yourself. Rather, heal every part of yourself and integrate all these parts, and let your structure be what it is. Let your wholeness be aligned and well organized, and without trying to get rid of any part of you, right? And so imagine for a moment, if we have this kind of destructive worldview about maturation and growth, we could be causing ourselves more harm, more fragmentation, more segmenting off of different aspects of our psyche, more inner tension, inner conflicts, self-judgment, et cetera, that could set up worse issues or re-traumatize us down the line, right? If we understand that as we're healing, all we are doing is we're not taking away from anything we've been. We're only adding new rings on the tree, more layers of growth, more expansion into new capacities, which gives us a greater range of motion and more options in how we express, how we embody, how we show up who we can be, essentially, right? If we think of it like that, then not only is that, I think, the greater win-win here, where you're not creating a conflict with the younger parts of yourself or creating some sort of dissociation in your psyche and fragmentation, where your system doesn't have to, essentially break itself or ignore part of itself, but rather, not only that, sorry, tangent, not only that, but also it's not only the bigger win-win, I just think it's a more accurate representation of what it means to be an evolving, growing, learning organism, right? Part of our capacity for growth and healing forward, right, is iterating forward with new abilities and new discoveries and new capacities and stretching and growing, right? This is one of the big misconceptions about healing also, so I started this video talking about misconceptions about maturation in our society, but another one about healing is that, we have to, that what it means to heal is essentially to kind of push away the past, or that it's only about going into the past to heal. Right? That I'm going backwards to the past. I'm going back to that old memory or that old time and those old fears, and I'm going to fix that thing in the past. Right? But another way of understanding healing is that I'm growing healthy capacities forward that reframe those old patterns from the past that didn't work for me and were painful and caused me a lot of dysfunction in my life. So instead of I'm going to remedy an old pattern, another way of understanding healing is also I'm going to grow new capacities that are healthier, that are better, and I'm going to inhabit those more. And I'm going to use all of that, right? And live in all of that more than I'm going to live in this old limited pattern that caused me and perhaps others a lot of suffering, right? And so this really, it's important to understand that we are adding new abilities, we're adding new learnings, we're adding new capacities, we're adding new depth. And in that adding, there's a lot of resolution. And quite frankly, this is something I learned from one of my NLP trainings a long time ago. I forget which teacher said this, but somewhere along the line, I heard the idea that if the unconscious mind or the nervous system, however you want to think of that, is given two options or more than two options, and one of those options is going to be better than the others, the unconscious mind is generally always, when it perceives the better option, going to take the better option, right? So if we think about this, if we're growing and we're creating new possibilities for ourselves, and these new possibilities are better, they feel better, they work better, they're more functional, they're more fulfilling, they frame things in a much more useful, healthy, happy, win-win light for our life, for ourselves, for those around us, for our relationships. Our system is going to tend to want to choose that, because why would I choose, an old pattern that didn't work as well, that I've tried and that I know creates a lot of stress for myself and perhaps for others, when this better new pattern offers me so much more of what I want in my life, right? And so this is the way to think about your healing path. It's not destructive. You're not cutting off these young parts of you. You're not simply tossing away all your capacity, Another example before we go here, and then we'll kind of wrap this up because I know I'm rambling again, brain dump here, but another example would be, let's say there's a person who's gone through a bunch of trauma. They've developed the capacity to be a real a-hole, for lack of a better term, right? They know how to put that on when they need to. And perhaps in a younger version of themselves coming from trauma, they were kind of that way all the time in the world. And it kind of worked in a certain sense, but also over time kind of started to work against them and, damaged their relationships or isolated the person or became more painful and dissatisfying than satisfying, that kind of a thing, right? But this person, through their adverse experiences, developed this ability. right? So if we're thinking of maturation and growth as being a destructive process, we are throwing all that out. Now that person has no adaptive ability to be assertive and protect themselves in a good way. Is there a time where that old ability of theirs to be an a-hole might come in really handy in the future? Maybe, right? I don't know. Obviously, this is a hypothetical, but maybe, right? So if that's the case, doesn't it make more sense, that maybe that person would want to keep that, And in my experience, if there's something useful in an older behavior pattern, even if generally it's dysfunctional for our current age or current life situation, generally the unconscious mind will keep it, and there will be resistance to changing it because there's something useful or positive or important there, right? So if we look at growth instead as again, this destructive process, but as an expansion, as an additive process, it really resolves that tension, that conflict, where I either have to choose my new good self or I can be my old bad self, but then I lose all this old stuff, right? That perhaps is valuable learning or valuable parts of my character or useful life skills, right? And so this is more the reality of the situation in my experience. And I think this is even just true in time, right? If you stop and you think about it for a moment, you can't really go into the past and change things. Like that literally doesn't exist anymore. It's just, there is no past. All we have is the present moment. Whatever you're thinking of as the past is actually just memories, which are actually probably just literally neural circuits firing away in your brain, constructs in your neurology. And that's what it would mean to go up and clean the past anyways, right? You can't literally go change the past. So you can't return, another thing a lot of people want is they want to return to some earlier experience in life that was really good. This is a common thing I see also where people are like, I had an awesome period in my life and then I went through a hellish period in my life and I've been suffering so much and I want to return to how it felt during that awesome period. And again, growth and healing is additive. We grow forward. Time doesn't move backwards, as far as I know, unless there's some weird freaky quantum physics thing I'm not aware of, which means that we have to heal and grow forward. So can you integrate more of that feeling from the past and that way of being and way of seeing and operating from the past and put that into your future? Sure, absolutely. Why not? But you can't literally go into the past because there is no past, right? So understanding that there's literally no way to grow in a kind of destructive way. We are growing in an iterative, additive way where we are adding more and more layers to our being. Last example I'll give here, and then I'll quit my rambling, but hopefully this is useful for you guys. Let me know. I always feel vulnerable talking like just at length on the camera, especially if I'm a little tired like I am today. Last example here. Every therapist, and quite frankly, even those of us who are not therapists, who are kind of lay people, understand the idea of regression into younger aspects of ourselves. We've all either ourselves been triggered and discovered our own behavior, acting like an upset child, right? Or like a teenager, or, we have seen others be triggered to the point where they regress back to a much younger version of themselves. Certainly, if you're in the psychedelic world and you're holding space around other people doing psychedelics, you will see them regress sooner or later. Regression is a known thing. It's a known occurrence, right? So if real maturation and growth were this destructive process, that wouldn't be possible. You wouldn't be able to regress into a younger part of yourself because that just wouldn't be there anymore. It wouldn't be accessible. And that's just a distortion of reality to think of it that way. The reality is that as we're growing, we are always adding, right? And so think about what this means in terms of your healing path, like we're talking about here, and your personal development path and your spiritual growth path, right? Think also about what this means in terms of our societal expectations and constructs around how you should be behaving at certain ages, right? If I've seen anything in the last, let's say, 20 years of adulthood for me, 25 years of adulthood for me, and all my, seminars and personal development stuff, if I've seen anything, I've seen that it doesn't matter what age you are, people will display the maturity of very younger aspects of themselves at any age, right? So I think we really need to radically rethink our misunderstanding around this and our expectations around this, and come to understand that growth is an additive thing, and that there's still a range of motion there for a person's nervous system. That includes everything we've been before, but also, includes our cutting edge or what we've recently developed. So that's a thought for now. I hope this is useful for you. Let me know what you think. Please leave a comment down below if this resonates. And, do the YouTube algorithm things for me, the like, the subscribe, the thumbs up, the comment, the whatever, share with someone, all that stuff that I very rarely ask you to do these days. And yeah, much love to you guys. Thank you for watching if you made it through these 20 minutes with me. All right, take care. Talk to you soon.